funds, the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, and the Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec, the CDPQ. I'd like to congratulate the government of Indonesia for this tremendous success. Nevertheless, as Indonesia continues its impressive economic growth and sets ever more ambitious development goals, we know that its infrastructure needs will remain significant. And this underlies the importance of having the government and the private sector continue to work closely together to build on the current momentum. And today's market engagement event aims to support just that by providing a valuable opportunity to discuss challenges and opportunities and catalyze future. It's also an opportunity for the government to share its pipeline of PPP projects in 3 sectors that are critical to Indonesia's development, namely healthcare, water, and transportation, or as we say, its own.
Thank you, Mr. Kevin Tokar. We now move to our next agenda, which is a keynote speech followed by a presentation on the PPP project pipeline from the Director of Innovative Funding Engagement at the Ministry of National Development Planning, Bapak Sri Bagus Guritno. To the distinguished Bapak Sri Bagus Guritno, the time and place is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Kevin Tokar, the head of Development Cooperation of Global Affairs Canada, Pak Snyder Siahan, our Deputy Minister and Head of PPP Joint Office Secretary, Pak Bramantyo Istiojo, and fellow of PPP Joint Office stakeholder, distinguished moderator, speaker, and respondent, also honorable event participants that attend this event in person or virtually through Zoom application and YouTube channel. First, I would like to express my appreciation since this event, Indonesia PPP Market Engagement Forum, could be held now through the good collaboration of Government of Canada, World Bank, and my fellow PPP Joint Office stakeholder. I hope this event could create further collaboration and cooperation between the government, investor, and financier, especially for development of better infrastructure in Indonesia. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, being a Director of Innovative Funding Engagement in Bappenas, I am very aware that innovative funding and financing for infrastructure development is crucial as a backbone for economic recovery, as well as for pushing growth in the long term. There are several potential implementation of innovative financing in Indonesia's infrastructure project. First, public-private partnership scheme, where the government and business entity collaborate for infrastructure development. Second, the potential infrastructure financing through blended finance. Third, the optimization of the low-cost fund and other alternative financing scheme for infrastructure development, especially for project refinancing. It will enable the potential alternative financing from different sources by consider of the level of risk. For increasing the project bankability by providing government guarantee and developing other de-risking instrument. Thus, it is hoped that we could hear this topic more deeply through the next business review discussion. By receiving your input and adapting them, I believe that the innovative fundings and financing could support and accelerate sustained infrastructure development that can contribute to Indonesia economic recovery. For that matters, Indonesia government is obviously aware of the significant role of the private sector in accelerating the economic growth. The government's ability to fund infrastructure development is only in USD 166 billion or 37% of total needs, while only 20% the total needs will be funded by state and regional owned enterprise. We need innovative effort to encourage the participant of private and business entity to finance the remaining 42% infrastructure development need. Especially in this current situation, the economic recovery phase after pandemic, innovative financing also play an important role in supporting sustainable infrastructure development, since most of the government budget have been allocated for handling the pandemic impact and may be focusing only on basic service infrastructure. Therefore, through this event, we encourage more private investment, including from international partners, by addressing concern in sustainability and resilience for better infrastructure development. We are hope the sponsor, investor, lender, and all development partners feel comfortable and eventually convinced that the Indonesia is the right place for investment and appropriate destination for global economic cooperation. And for this, the PPP Joint Office, along with other state agency, will produce some measure need to attract prospective investor through establishing strategic partner that result a mutual benefit for both sides. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as you may know that public-private partnership could improve the quality and quantity of infrastructure project, help the realization of required infrastructure project, and well allocate of risk sharing to meet on schedule, on budget of build infrastructure. Indonesia government has successfully implemented 6 schemes as a benchmark of future PPP project that will bring benefit to you through the government guarantee, viability gap fund, funding in kind of construction support, ability payment for return, success fee mechanism, and also unsolicited PPP scheme. We keep improving our regulation to easy and improve private appetite. As also we always welcome your input on regulation improvement with open arms. During the next business review session 2, we will deeply discuss the drinking water, hospital and logistic sector. There are success PPP project in water supply sector, but implementation process experience issue as a lack of harmonization between upstream and downstream. Though fortunately, the SPC could claim the government guarantee. It is shown that our concern to project de-risking so that you do not hesitate to invest in our PPP project. Then for the health sector, to date, there are no successful PPP project in hospital. We will be able to discuss how develop feasible hospital project, especially since currently Bappenas is facilitating study development of hospital project in Sampang, Wonosobo, and Samarinda. It is opportunity to learn from the expert in this sector. We also discussed the logistics sector, since as we might be aware, the logistics sector is the backbone of economic growth that need to be strengthened. Honorably, ladies and gentlemen, we already have success to implement PPP scheme. In Indonesia, we have 12 under operation, 9 under construction project, and the PPP solicit with a total value more than USD 10 billion. Then we screen ongoing PPP project priority sector that we are ready to be offered to you as our quick wins project. Those PPP projects under the red box are projects that do not have outstanding issue or already have issue resolution plan. Those PPP projects are feasible or indicate to be commercially viable, cost-saving financial internal return value greater than 11%, and positive net present value. Also, the PPP project have attractive project investment value is greater than rupiah 200 billions. And we are identified that to be ready and carry out transaction phase in the next year. Next slide. Also have unsolicited project PPP, and we have screened them as well. We encourage you, our potential bidder and financier, to invest and keep being updated on PPP project pipeline. Distinguished participant, during this event, please do not hesitate to convey your concern, especially on how we could collaborate for better infrastructure development. I hope during this event, we could create win-win solution on how to improve the project visible bankability toward a better Indonesia. Last but not least, on behalf of PPP Joint Office stakeholder, which consists 8 institutions, we would like to express our deep appreciation for all moderator, speaker, respondent, and participant. Could you have joining online? Thank you for your participation and strengthen our collaboration for better infrastructure
Private sector expectations in the implementation of PPPs in Indonesia. This session will cover 4 subtopics. The first one is what is the private sector expectations in the implementation of PPPs in Indonesia? Second is developing green, sustainable, and inclusive infrastructure projects through PPP scheme. The third one, de-risking model in PPPs. And the fourth one, acceleration of PPP implementation. Together with us are 4 panelists, which have been chosen to represent 4 points of view that can provide us some different perspectives from the local international project developer, as well as local and international projects advisors and also lenders. Our first panelist is Pak Joko Santoso. Pak Joko is the Chief Operating Officer for Toll Road Divisions and General Manager of Corporate Strategy for PT Nusantara Infrastructure. Pak Joko has a vast experience in the fields of operations, management, and corporate strategy. He has been the General Manager of Corporate Strategy and COO for Toll Road Division of PT Nusantara Infrastructure since 2011. And in addition to that, since 2013, he is also assuming the Chief Operating Officer role in PT Marga Utama Nusantara, the subsidiary of PT Nusantara Infrastructure, which is currently managed 4 sections of toll roads in Greater Jakarta and Makassar. Welcome, Pak Joko. Second panelist is Mr. Richard Higgins, Associate Director of Plenary Group. Richard is Plenary Group's Asia Pacific origination team, working to invest in, develop, and manage infrastructure PPP projects. He also has an extensive experience leading plenaries works in Southeast Asia and in the Middle East across a range of infrastructure sectors, and he is with plenary since 2017, and before that he was with Macquarie Group in Principal Investment Groups. Welcome, Richard Higgins. Third panelist, my longtime friend, Pak Irman Boyle.
Hello, Rio. Yeah.
Head of Advisor Group for PT Indonesia Infrastructure Finance. Pak Irman has an extensive experience with the infrastructure and energy sector since his days in the Asian Development Bank. He has also been with Indonesia Infrastructure Finance since 2012 and currently assuming the role of Head of Advisor Group in his position, and he oversees and involved in several landmark PPP projects in Indonesia as transaction advisor. Our fourth panelist, Mr. Benjamin Yo, Director of Infrastructure and Finance Development for Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation, SMBC. Ben is experienced projects and asset acquisition financing bankers with a strong track record in leading, structuring, and executing financing across Asia, excluding Japan. He has been with SMBC since 2013 and currently covering the general infrastructure sectors with prior experience in the energy, natural resources, and focusing on oil and gas. So welcome, Ben. Without further ado, I would like to kickstart our discussion with the first subtopic, which is the private sector expectations in the implementation of PPPs in Indonesia. Our first question to all of the panelists, what is the general overview towards the existing PPP projects and also the existing PPP project pipelines in Indonesia? Pak Joko?
Okay, thank you, Pak Deo. In general, from our perspective, being a local investor which currently manages several portfolio, we are thinking that the list of the PPP project that currently offered by the government is actually still very interesting. Yeah, it helped us to close the gap of the infrastructure development, whereas we all understand actually in the government have quite significant plan to deliver 450 something billion US dollar for infrastructure development until 2024, whereas in the same time there is some gap issues on the funding. So in the private sector like Nusantara Infrastructure, very keen to be involved in this kind of the opportunity. Of course, we will try to find the suitable portfolio that fit with our core business. But the challenge actually how to meet the balance between economic feasibility and financial feasibility. That's from our perspective.
Thank you, Pak. So the balance between economic and financial feasibility is very important for private sector or private investors such as Nusantara in terms of selecting the project. Richard, can I go to you? What is your general overview towards these PPPs?
Yeah, thanks, Pak Leo. And I guess just as an introductory overview to plenary group, so our core business is very much availability payment-based PPP projects in the social infrastructure and civil and transport sectors. So our portfolio today, I think, is 77 assets, mainly between Canada, US, Australia, and now we've just closed our first in the Middle East. And I say that only because I think we've always had an eye on Indonesia. We would love to do a social infrastructure project here, particularly. Healthcare was mentioned in the last speaker's remarks, and I think we would be very excited in that sector in particular. And we've looked also at sort of two what would be new sectors for us, but still sort of we think would be a nice fit with our core business. And these were coming through before COVID, but that was waste to energy and smart street lighting. And obviously the last 2 to 3 years has been really difficult for everyone. We haven't been able to visit Indonesia. But as we start to engage again, I think, like I say, those sectors would be really exciting to us: availability, payment-based, healthcare, social infrastructure. And then obviously the key one for us is just to see the continuation of, strong processes, which COVID has made difficult too. So hope we can get those back on track.
Awesome. Thank you, Richard. Noted that availability payment for healthcare, social infrastructure, waste to energy, so many opportunities. Okay, thank you, Richard. Pak Irman, can I go to you?
Yeah, thank you, Deo. So I think, as PPP scheme is evolving, the more difficult the project is becoming. But so the low-hanging fruit projects, for example, has been transacted and delivered 10 years ago. And we started with sophisticated government contracting authorities, right? With PLN, with BPJT, for example. And now, basically, we see the projects in water sector, for example, and then toll road sector, toll road in urban setting, which make the cost per kilometer expensive, or toll road project which expands beyond the urban area, which make the ramp up traffic is slower, for example. And then we see projects in healthcare. We see project in the across regional PPP, for example. So all this project is actually becoming more difficult in structuring, in preparation process. For example, a lot of government decision making need to be taken, not only at the national, but also at the city and also the municipal level. And then a lot of fiscal commitment, a lot of discussion with the local parliament, for example. And so that's one side. And then basically you're also dealing with many stakeholders involved now. And in healthcare, for example, and then in the municipal ways, we are dealing with government contracting authority that not used to be interacting with the private sector entities. So their sense of having a long-term contract, conversions in English project documentation, for example. So we are not there yet. So I would say, as Joko mentioned, the private sector interest is still there, right? The funding gap is really clear. So basically, there is no question for PPP in Indonesia. Doing qualitative analysis on the funding rations that need to be done by the government is actually allow or justify the use of PPP. But then how we can deliver this, with regard to the government decision making, with regard to the government capacity to become the to facilitate further PPP development in the next decade. So we have passed the first decade of PPP development. Now we are entering the second decade of PPP. So it's not going to be easy.
Noted that. Thank you, Pak Irman. Looking forward to that. Ben,
Right.
what is
Thank
your
you, Pak.
general overview first?
Great. Thank you, Pak Dio. I think as everyone is aware, I think SMBC is one of the largest project financiers globally. And we have been looking at infrastructure projects globally and even in Asia as well. I think Indonesia is definitely a country of interest for us. So we have made a lot of investments, PTPN, our local banking subsidiary, and of course IIF as well. So I would say that generally speaking, PV projects, like I think all the panelists here, the pipeline that you have is interesting. I think even in terms of the mechanisms, you do have them in place. But the thing is also that I think from an international lender's perspective, there's always, perhaps some missing gaps. I guess the process is also seems a bit long from our perspective. And I think it's so perhaps what Pak Iman just mentioned previously, that now the projects that you're looking at on EPP perspective is more complex, involving more stakeholders. So process is a bit longer, but I guess from an interest perspective, especially from international lenders or even investors per se, if you could kind of expedite that, I think that would make it more interesting as well. And secondly, I think we'll probably touch on that later on, is about the de-risking and coverage of things like the IGF, etc., and all that. I think the elements are there, but I think in terms of the coverage, etc., it's probably a bit different from what international investors and lenders are expecting.
Thank you,
That's all
Ben.
from my end. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to be more specific now, I would like to go to our second questions, where what is your expectations to all the panelists towards the government, which will make PPP projects and private sectors more attracted to participate in PPP projects? Expectation towards governments. Pak Joko, please.
Okay, thank you, Pak Deo. This is very interesting question. Yeah. This is actually, we are looking forward to explain or to share our perspective. Indeed, actually, in our view, being involved in several KPPU or PPP project for the last few years, even before pandemic, we found out that actually there is some lesson learned that could be considered as a feedback. We would like to see actually some PPP project that actually delivering into the market through the market sounding and so on, or even going even to the RFP level, can demonstrate some better project readiness. Yeah, I think why? Because in several cases, whereas we are committed in the involvement of the PPP project, we working together with our global partner that actually pursuing this opportunity. And then the first job that we are doing in the first place when we are committed into the PPP involvement, we need to do study. When conducting study with our global partner, strategic investor partner, normally they would like to have a credible study from the reputable consultant, reputable analyst, and so on. And with engage not a small investment. Nevertheless, somehow we find out actually after we already go through into the more detailed study, the project itself is not demonstrate a readiness to be further follow up. And then we give some feedback to the government agency on this, and then we are experienced in several in certain project that we finally decided not to continue because of the structure is not really workable for us. So I think this will creating some issues in the future if you would like to invite the global partner to follow some certain project like that. So I think one of the key lessons learned from this actually how to create a PPP project that reflect a sound business case. It will be reflected by how the credibility of the information, the data, and then the fair structure, and also the existence of the government role on the guarantee. So this actually some point that we'd like to highlight, Pak Deo.
Thank you, Pak Joko. So guarantee, Pak. There's a touch on guarantee. Thank you, Richard. Please, what is your expectation towards the government involvement for PPPs?
Yeah, thanks, Pak Deo. So when I guess we look at government involvement, we're thinking about particularly the structure of the project, and that really comes to the risk allocation and the process by which that project is coming to the market, which I think is what Pak Joko is saying as well, really starting with that market sounding. And we are always very happy to be involved in as many market soundings for as long as it takes to get a structure developed for a project that is reflective of the desires of the market. So not just us as equity investors, but contractors and particularly lenders as well, to know that that project is going to be bankable when it does come to market. If we have one frustration is there are often market sounding processes that ask for feedback but don't listen to it. And as our bid costs for these projects can be really significant. So we need to be very careful about which processes we invest in. That said, here in Indonesia, I think on the actual risk allocation and the structure side, we see we really like Indonesia for the reason there is. You have the IIGF, the IIF. Those are not existing in other places. So there's a lot of attractive structural elements to the market here that give us a lot of confidence. So for us, it really is more about the process. For example, the projects we've done recently in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East have been very, very punctual. And that, I think, really sends a clear message as well, right back from market sounding to RFQ. When that runs to time, it gives you a great sense of confidence that everything coming after that will also run to time. So if I had, I guess, a range of thoughts, but I think the process, the timeliness, and the real interaction quality of that process is important to us.
Thank you, Richard. So timeliness, punctuality, something that we are not very good at. We still need some improvement. Pak Irman, any expectations?
Yeah, I think, from my side, I can say that what we are looking for from the government is actually political will and project leaderships. Yeah. So political will from the head of the government contracting authority, and then project leaderships up to the to the tender committee, for example, from project structuring, project design, and then up to the project transactions. So we need all this, Pak, so as to meet the project timeline, to create a bankable project, right? So what we need especially eventually is back to the person, to the government contracting authority that will drive this project. So foremost is actually because of what happenings now, projects that involve regional, cross city or cross municipalities, for example, or project in new sector like housing, health, for example, that government has not yet make any decision on how to involve on the private sector investment, for example. So there's still a lot of gap in understanding how to attract, how to lack of appreciation of what the private sector need to be able to make decision to invest, for example. So that's basically only come from political will and also project leaderships. And eventually, when we come to the project preparation and funding, then we also need this also relevant to the general investment climate in Indonesia. For example, related to the rule of law, that's choice of court, for example, dispute resolution, choice of language, things like that. And then also the what I note from the project pipelines, that's project size, Pak. So the project size is is less than the sweet spot. The sweet spot for PPP project may be around 250, 500 million US dollars, but the project offered to the market is less than that. Or we only have unsolicited project with billion US dollar requirement, but that is unsolicited. So it's actually difficult for a new potential investor to come in to Indonesia. If it has nothing, it has not track record in doing investment in Indonesia, for example, it will be difficult for a new entrant to do a project in Indonesia.
Thank you, Pak Irman. So a bit of touch in the the readiness of the executor of the project. If I may conclude, Ben, please.
Project bisa sesuai dengan timeline adalah ini sudah dibukanya, udah dibuka nih mikrofonnya sebenarnya belum menentukan apakah mereka tahu bagaimana caranya mau melibatkan sektor swasta ke dalam proyek-proyek itu, contohnya proyek perubahan, proyek kesehatan begitu. Dan tentunya juga investasi di Indonesia ini juga dipersulit oleh kesulitan dalam pemilihan bahasa, kemudian juga regulasi,
I think we generally cannot hold it.
sengketa, solusinya seperti apa.
Hello. Yeah. So I think if the process takes too long, the interest of like from the international community, you know, whether you look at it from a lender's perspective or even from the investor's perspective, it's hard to kind of hold their attention. So I think it needs to be a kind of like a two-way street where both the government and the private sector actually communicate and basically hearing and taking the feedback from the private sector to kind of like try and expedite and make the whole market sounding process a bit shorter. Yeah, but I think, you know, financing basically, if I would see it, is always the last piece of the puzzle. If the sponsors are comfortable, if the project is properly structured, frankly speaking, you know, as a financier, it's a no-brainer for me. And it's only when, you know, there's certain pieces that are missing, it makes our job a bit difficult. But once you solve like the key pieces of the puzzle, I think, you know, from the interest from the international financing community would definitely be there.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. So thank you to all the panelists. Bit of touch on the government side there, on the timeliness, on the readiness of the human resources, and also to wrap up the puzzle, you know, basically the financiers is just the last missing piece once everything's ready. Thank you. So I would like to go to the last question for this subtopic, which is I would like to address to PTNI, Pak Joko, and also to Richard. How do you improve accessibility and public services for infrastructure by leveraging digital infrastructure implementations in PPP? So a bit of touch on the digital side, Pak.
Thank you. Indeed, actually, this is another area that is very interesting from the PPP. We actually with plenary been engaged in a project for the PPP structure. I think 2 years ago, we've been working together to explore, discuss with the other consortium, international consortium, to explore the possibility and involve in the PPP for the infrastructure digital. At that time, we are working together, explore this possibility because we believe in this, especially after COVID pandemic era. Digital economy, digital business is something is inevitable. So we believe there is some areas that actually in Indonesia particularly still need to be improved as well, and we are willing to participate in this development of the digital infrastructure. Some story that we'd like to highlight during this process, actually, as mentioned by Pak again from plenary, actually the issue in terms of the timeline, in terms of the and then in terms of the clarity in terms of the structure. So we've been investing a lot of time to discuss together, yeah, Robert, and anyhow we find out actually in the project is no longer any update, yeah, and then we finally to hold our effort to continue our process. So the lesson learned today here actually how to consider elaborating the digital infrastructure into the PPP in more solid basis, and we really sure that actually there is some urgent requirement to build digital infrastructure to support the digital environment, and we find out today the need is there, but how to put it into the priority of the PPP list in the PPP option that going to the market sounding. I think that will be some view from us.
Yeah, thank you. So about prioritizing digital infrastructure and infrastructure related projects. So
Yeah, thanks, Pak Teo. I probably don't have too much to add
Yeah.
after Pak Joko is going to draw on the same examples. And digital is definitely new for us as well. We're remarkably boring in what we do with infrastructure. But where we have looked at similar, started to look at technology or digital-based projects, including most recently in the Middle East. We think it's a really great opportunity for governments too, because typically these concessions, depending on the technology, can be quite short, timed around effectively the lifespan of that technology before it's likely to be replaced, and can have a very clear payoff ratio in the sense that the cost of the PPP to install this technology is offset by saving somewhere else for the government, most notably in energy. If we were looking at digital infrastructure and something like smart street lighting. So it's a really interesting space and still very, very new, but something we're, I think, like Pak Chakul said, very keen to look at.
Great. So there's still some interest towards the digital and also digital infrastructure implementations. Now allow me to start to our second subtopics, which is developing green, sustainable, and inclusive infrastructure projects through PPP scheme.
Digital infrastructure.
First question to all the panelists. What is your institution view regarding green and sustainable investment? And do you already have one in your portfolio, or are you still trying, or are you looking to explore such opportunity? Pak Joko.
Yes, thank you. Our company actually very committed to on the green and sustainable environment infrastructure development. We are currently managing for portfolio, the toll road sector, the renewable energy, water utilities, and also seaport. For the renewable energy itself, actually, we are already operate and COD, I think a year ago, 15 megawatt mini hydro in North Sumatra. And we also acquiring the 15 megawatt biomass in Kalimantan. We are still looking further another green business for renewable energy. We are proposing some collaboration with the government, the local government, or even we are considering to go into the PV business also. We are today actually observing any related green business, so that is support our company vision.
Understand. Thank you. Richard, please.
So likewise, we're quite new to it too. I think also we've, I want to say we missed the boat, but we probably weren't on the front of the wave for sustainability focused infrastructure. So we've been playing catch up a little bit there. I think from a company perspective, obviously we won't invest in infrastructure that's not, what that is harmful to the environment. That goes without saying. But in terms of, we don't have a renewable energy business at this stage. So I think it's something we're still open to, but we tend to see the opportunity for us as in projects with a reasonable amount of complexity to it still, and as an availability payment-based PPP investor, again, things like smart street lighting, which can have enormous energy savings, 70 to 80% on existing costs. And things like waste to energy as well. And then of course, in what we're doing in public transport solutions, there can be enormous savings to electrification. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you.
So that may not be quite the full answer.
It's getting there. Thank you, Richard. Pak Irman, I know I have this developing a lot of green and sustainable projects, please.
From our view, sustainable project is the only way, Pak. So if we are talking about sustainability theme projects, then basically it's a must. This is in response to the climate change situation, for example, in response to the risk management, for example, in response to the development of the capital market and financial institution in general that is moving toward more sustainable financing. So it's a must. So there is no question of whether should we do sustainable or non-sustainable? Should we do ESG-based project or we can avoid ESG-based project? No, it's the only way, Pak. What's it? Moving to the futures, yeah. So if we are talking about green project, of course, we are talking about energy system, energy efficient transportation system, for example. So it will depend on, whether the government can generate the the required project pipelines. So we understand that the government the transition scheme, right? So institution like IIF may be more working on the renewable energy side rather than the retiring the coal-fired power plants. So we have proposed the use of PPP as the blended finance platform for the development of new renewable energy capacity, for example. And then any potential use of energy storage system, a battery based or hydrogen based, for example, that we can also explore further. So basically, the leaderships coming from the government on these projects. And then what else on the sustainable project other than green projects, basically any projects, housing, healthcare, we can develop the project using the sustainability themes, yeah. But then I should say that that's the only way, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Herman. Ben, please. Yeah.
Thank you. I think for green financing and sustainable financing is definitely an institutional focus for us. I think globally, basically, we have a target under our GreenX Globe 2030. We're supposed to, by 2030, invest about $200 billion USD towards financing green and sustainable projects. So definitely is a focus for us, and it's a key part of what we do. And in fact, if I were to look at my colleagues globally, there's a lot of focus on powering renewables, financing renewables, and even now I think for infrastructure, there's also a bit of a sustainable theme to it. Things like waste to energy projects, etc., is definitely a key part of what we do want to work on. I think renewables, one of the notable projects that we have done in Indonesia would be the Chirata floating solar project.
Yeah. Great. Just to touch on that, I would like to go to
Jadi
the
green
next
project
question
ini
for
masih
this
merupakan
topic,
hal yang
subtopics,
baru.
and I would like to stay with you,
Tapi
Ben.
jika pertanyaan
On
adalah apakah kita
also based on
harus
your experience financing
melakukan
green
sustainability project, dan
infrastructure projects
jawabannya
such as the
adalah
Chirata
harus
project,
gitu.
what is
Dan
or
untuk
do you have any
project-project
recommendation to
yang
the government
berhubungan
of
climate
Indonesia
change, ya,
to
kemudian juga
encourage
capital
more
market,
private
tentunya hal
participations in
tersebut
the green,
membutuhkan
sustainable,
sustainable
and
project.
inclusive infrastructure
Dan
projects?
seperti project-project yang berhubungan
Sure,
dengan
I
energy
think that's
storage,
definitely
hal
an
tersebut masih sangat bisa
angle that we
dieksplor.
would like
Dan
the
secara global
government to
ada sekitar
work
200
towards.
billion
From our end, I think
sustainable
as
green
a
project
private
yang harus
sector financial
dialokasikan.
institution,
Dan tentunya
we have internally we do have like KPIs and to kind of encourage more green financing to happen. In terms of like incentivizing our various departments and our various countries to lend at a lower rate. I think from our perspective, cost of financing, that's what we can do. From the government perspective, I guess what we would like to see is perhaps a bit more, even more support for green projects. By itself, maybe economically, from a cost perspective, you might not really, it might not be that cheap. But I think with all green projects, the approach that we take as an institution, and I think other investors and financial institutions as well, is to consider the social costs and to have a forward-looking view in terms of that, and perhaps providing whether you look at it from for example, viability gap financing, or increasing like the tariff payments, or even if you look at things like tax breaks, that those are, I think, key instruments that the government can do, and it would definitely help. Back to the whole fundamental point of project economics, help it make more sense for the private sector to be involved in. But from the private sector perspective, I think there are tools, mechanisms, and incentives for us to kind of do our part in terms of subsidizing the development of green and sustainable financing.
Thank you, Ben. Pak Irwan, Any inputs or recommendations to the government to encourage more private green infrastructure projects?
Yeah, it's basically the same, Pak, with any other infrastructure projects. But what I've been what I've been seeing lately is basically the lack of government implementation. The commitment is there from the president, from the Ministry of Finance, from the Ministry of Energy, but then we see, the lack of actual plan, actual program, actual timeline of project development, for example. So eventually, I understand, for example, we understand that maybe the government is having, difficult choice on what to do with the stranded assets, for example, right? But they will have to, it's difficult situation, a difficult decision that has to be taken not only by government of Indonesia, but over other government in the world, right? But then eventually, this is a political decision that will need to be taken. And I think the presidents, the ministers have been very supportive. And then it's up to the implementing entities, on how to translate this into an actual program with a solid timeline that actually eventually will deliver.
Thank you, Panwan. Richard, please.
I think I probably wouldn't have too much
You wouldn't
to
have too
add
much?
after, yeah,
Okay,
well
Pak Joko,
covered.
Pak Joko maybe.
Yeah, no, I just echoing what already mentioning by all panelists. Actually, yes, the consistent implementation is one of the key, Pak.
Understood.
Yeah, I think while actually we already hear many times that the government promoting the green energy, how to build more and more renewable energy. This is one example. But at the same time, we are facing situation where a private sector have some challenge in terms of the absorption of the energy that delivered by the independent power producer. So when talking about the new mini hydro project, for instance, we have some pipeline in terms of the development new project, but in the same time we are facing some situation that an oversupply situation, or probably in the willingness to absorb that. So I think this is one of the challenge, how to address this, how to match.
Streamline.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
How to streamline between the planning and execution. Thank you, Pak Joko. So that wraps up our second subtopic in the green infrastructure and sustainable projects. Now I would like to go to our third subtopic. We've also covered pretty much on this. It's the de-risking model in PPP. So yeah, to all panelists, how do you see as a sponsor and as a lender in regarding the de-risking concept and how it already been planned in Indonesia? Please, Pak Joko.
Yeah, the de-risking concept actually we think is very important. This is the time where we have to allocate proportionally the risk to all the respective parties. We also believe that actually the de-risking can help to improve the project bankability. Now, what is the challenge? The challenge is actually how to build a fair risk allocation. That will be one of the challenge which relate to the project readiness when developing the RFP document. When RFP document already issued and reflecting some risk allocation, that will be very critical for us to make analysis about the project viability, go on no go. Sometimes we observe in one of on the PPP project that we involve, the risk allocation not really interesting enough for us. I mean, in terms of the risk sharing, we absorb so much risk for this project. But in the other hand, whenever the risk allocation is transferred into the private parties, there is no such a clarity in terms of clear support. I think I will give you a more concrete example. I mean, when talking about the toll road business, one of the critical issues is land acquisition. under the PPP rule, the land acquisition has to be absorbed by the government. Then somehow, due to the funding issues, then the process, timeline, and so on, the land acquisition is built out by the private sector. Now the challenge is how long the private sector can absorb the billing, because it's also cost that come with that we got from the
Bridging financing.
bridging financing that also involves some material cost of fund. Then we have no certainty how long it will be covered. Yeah. So I think there is some back to the concept of de-risking, how we can package the de-risking to be mutually fair for everyone.
Thank you, Pak Joko. Very valuable input in terms of allocations and also the risk and the absorptions, and also how can we fairly distribute it, yeah, Pak, yeah. Thank you. Richard, please.
Thanks, Pak Deo. I feel like we've exchanged notes beforehand. I was going to say much the same thing. No amount of de-risking mechanisms per se would overcome what ideally should be a sensible risk allocation. And land acquisition is the one that always comes to mind, particularly in this part of the world for us. So perhaps if I set that aside and I just went back to the process risk, again, it would be, I just can't stress enough, I guess, that really strong interaction in the market sounding process, and being willing to hold that early and actually take time to bring the right structured project to market by the stage of RFQ, RFP, such that these issues are very well taken care of, and they're not things that the market is then having to react negatively towards just at the time that we're trying to get that project to procurement. So yeah, that's out on the process risk, but as I say, on the actual risk allocation, that is fundamental. The guarantee structures, etc., here in Indonesia are really strong. So it really is, I echo that it's on the risk allocation.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Pak Herman.
Yeah, Pak Deo. I think with regard to infrastructure investment in general, yeah, the use of PPP schemes and then the facilities provided by the government, for example, sovereign government guarantee by IIGF, VGF, Viability Gap Fund, for example, and then affordability payment scheme, and then project development facility. This is all basically a de-risking facility provided by the government. So I think you refer to the de-risking facility that will be available in the market, right? A private sector solution to the de-risking. Yeah, this is something that that institution like PTSMI, for example, and also IIF as the MOF Special Mission Vehicle try to develop. So we identify, for example, risk in foreign currency, interest rate, for example, cash flow deficiency, for example. So all these things, should be able to be facilitated by institutions like us. And I think this is where we are going, yeah. And then support from the government and also from the multilateral and bilateral partners in providing, sort of quote-unquote seed capital, for example, or grant to develop these market instruments. I think if we do it rightly, and then eventually we will be able to provide market solution for this de-risking need.
Thank you, Pak Herman. And Ben, probably last one from you. And also maybe you can touch a bit on, what kind of international best practice that you've seen and you've come across in terms of de-risking.
Sure. Happy to talk about that. But I think before that, just to perhaps reiterate, I guess, Richard and Pak Joko, you've really kind of mentioned in terms of like, de-risking is to just kind of make sure that, the parties that basically allocated the risk basically take the ones that are correct parties to assume the risk. So definitely, I think land acquisition is one of the things that come to mind. The other is obviously, depending on who the government contracting authorities, GCA is, the question about the guarantee, the IGF guarantee, VGF, becomes important as well. And I think sharing the observations of the panelists here, you do have all these elements in place. It's just that, you know, from an international perspective, the coverage is a bit lacking, and I think that's something that perhaps the various parties could look into. I think when it comes to international best practices, normally I think they would try to de-risk it maximum extent. So for example, if you were to talk about tariffs being taken by a regional government or municipal government per se, and if there's some sense of uncomfortableness in terms of like the creditworthiness of the government, then typically I think what we have seen in other examples is that the government will step up and kind of be like the backstop guarantor as on a contingent basis, but yet at the same time making sure that the project fundamentally is able to be paid off by the government contracting entity in the first place. So I think that's one example that I can think of to align it with international best practices.
Thank you, Ben. Very interesting input there, and hopefully something that can also be applied here. Now, I know that the audience have a lot in their mind in terms of question and answers, but before going to the question and Q&A sessions, let me start our fourth and final subtopics, which is acceleration in PPP implementations. So what needs to be done by the government in the preparation stage of the PPP project so that this project meets the expectation and it's acceptable by the private sector or the lenders? To our panelists, Pak Joko first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Dio. So I think if we allow to share some view from our perspective, first we need to develop a sound business case of the project that reflect the better readiness. I think it will reflect some data about the market, the structure, the fair structure, the risk allocation, and so on. We also concerned actually to allow project to be more attractive on the investor. We would like to see the consistent element that already mentioned. First, we understand that PPP somehow needs some support backup from the government in terms of the guarantee. It might be good for the prospective investor if the guarantee exists from the beginning until the end, because somehow we are following the project, and then the project in the beginning already mentioned there will be some guarantee from the government, but later on the guarantee element is fade away, and then last but not least, for our perspective, actually it will be very interesting for the organizing committee or the project leadership of the PPP can also test the structure to the lender, commercial lender. Why? Because most of our fund that we will involve in the investment, 70% coming from the commercial. There will be the critical partner that will observe, that will analyze and review whether the project is workable or not, bankable or not. So we understand actually the committee already involved a very various credible consultant institution, but having said that, we have to take into consideration they are sitting on the organizing committee perspective. They are not sitting on the investor perspective. So I think to make it fair and workable, then after the structure is already developed, before we do the market sounding, it will be interesting to test the water to the commercial lender, whether they're willing to finance this. Because if they're willing to finance this, to our view, definitely we will see the project viability to be continue is high.
Thank you. Very interesting, Pak Joko, to involve and to take some buy-ins from the market first before this project goes into implementations. For Richard, please, in terms of acceleration of PPP implementations, what kind of expectations do you have from the government?
So I think again keep coming back to the market sounding process, but if I use an example, we see typically two approaches. One is a sort of broad brush where there's a market sounding process, everyone responds to a questionnaire, goes into a black hole, and then some months later out comes an RFQ or an EOI. What we've really appreciated from certain government clients we've had recently is more of a multi-phase project. So initial questionnaire, what is your feedback on this project? And this is obviously all in parallel to their own feasibility work. But then sort of narrowing that down to a series of smaller, more detailed one-on-one, often in-person discussions to really get a feel for what is really important to the market on this project. So that's been great. And then obviously from our perspective, we always look straight to who are the advisors for this project. One, who are the advisors, and two, are they being listened to? And that normally comes out, the key document is obviously the project agreement underpinning the concession. And one reason, for example, again, that we've got comfortable in the UAE recently is because those project agreements, you can pick them up, and any lawyer who's worked in an international PPP market that is established, namely UK, Australia, Canada, or in the power and water sector within the Middle East, which obviously has a strong track record, can look at those project agreements and say, I recognize all of these clauses from somewhere. And therefore I can say, this is reasonable, this is not, this is what we need to push back on. But it's very clear and easily understandable and recognizable. There's nothing particularly strange. And then building on that, there's a very clear, then again, coming back to that word of interaction with the client around an open discussion right to the point of submission, obviously, or probity permitting. But that says, knowing that the government client has put forward these positions, but is willing to have a very reasonable conversation about what is ultimately the best solution. And the words we always use again are value for money. That we're arguing this position because we think it's better for you and it's better for us. So if I could summarize all of that, I think interaction is a key point. Recognizability relative to international PPP existing best practice. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. That gives us a lot of confidence.
Great. Thank you, Richard. For Pak Irman and Ben, I think I would like to touch to another aspect, which is the staple financing. How can staple financing be carried out in PPP projects, and what is the feasible mechanism based on the experience for this? Pak Irman first, thanks.
Thank you, Pak Dio. So on staple financing is basically one of the effort to accelerate the development of PPP projects. Yeah. And the intention is basically to show to both government contracting authorities and also private sector bidders that funding will be available upon project award. But the most important thing, I think, during the preparation of the staple financing is to incorporate lenders' perspective, lenders' input into the project documentations. So in many cases, for example, project documentation has not been prepared in the, maybe in accordance with the private sector bidders, but not to the appetite of the long-term lenders sample. So that's actually one, I think, why we should have staple financing. So, and then the way we do it is actually, it should be, open to all potential financiers. It may be non-exclusive. So basically bidders can still go outside the, the staple financier. And also it's non-committal because of the process of the tender process at which, potential borrower, the actual borrower has actually not been identified, right? So still the bankers will need some reservation on whether to invest or not in the project. So I think we can design the staple financing structure to comply with any other requirements.
Thank you, Pak Irman. Ben, please, probably the last question for this session before I go to Q&A. Yes.
Yeah, I think Maybe this is a slightly controversial view,
Please.
but I think the fact of the matter is, like what I said earlier in the session, that the way I see it, financing is always the last piece of the puzzle, right? So staple financing, definitely, I do agree with Pak Iman here that it does send a strong signal to both the government as well as the private bidders that, look, you don't have to worry about financing. It's there. There will be support. So you don't have to worry about it. But essentially, for us to even get there, I think the fundamentals, again, back to the fundamentals of the project, the economics need to make sense. And, when you have all of those elements in place, right? Sponsors are on board, finances would definitely be on board as well. So I don't really perhaps think that in terms of stable financing, that should be kind of like top of your priority. Definitely it's good to have. But if you have all the other elements properly structured and it's there, I don't think you need to worry about financing. There's a lot of interest in Indonesia, and I think there's a lot of visibility in terms of the infrastructure projects that Indonesia is pushing out. So there will definitely be, I'm confident that there will definitely be interest from financiers as well, both on the international front as well as from the Indonesian lenders. Yeah.
Thank you. So that concludes our 4 topics of the first business review discussion. Please give a round of applause to all of our panelists. Now, allow me to go to our next round of discussion, which is the responder session. We have 3 responders. I would like to invite our first responder from PT Sarana Multi Infrastruktur, PT SMI, as their capacity of transaction advisor, represented by Pak Delano Dalo, Project Director. SMI has the experience of transaction advisors in several PP projects in Indonesia. And I would like to ask SMI about their experience, along with any inputs that can be provided to improve the preparation of PPPs, so that it can meet the private sector's expectation. Please, Pak Delano.
Thank you, Pak Deo. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera. I'd like to respond these queries. First, with what Pak Irman said before, the evolution of the PPP. I think any sector of this PPP in Indonesia has its own evolution. What Pak Irman said a decade ago, we faced the preparation and transaction stage on the electricity and toll road sectors. Decade ago. After that, we find more projects come in the electricity and in toll road sectors. And currently, this decade, we already talking about like divestment or any other creative or advanced financing mechanism in electricity and in toll road sectors. In other sectors, maybe this decade we comes from water sectors, communication and telematics in palaparing projects, and some of subsector of transportations. We face in challenge in the preparation and in the transaction before we face challenge in the operation and also the construction. So based on our experience, I think we have to find a clear business model in each sector that can streamline the interests of the private equity investors and also the lenders as a debt portion investors, and also the government with their own interests, with their own affordability. So in brief conclusion, I think what Indonesia and also government of Republic Indonesia especially needs to improve is there are 2 main factors in my perspective. First is the GCA maturity, then the second one is the maturity of the business model in any sector. And I would like to also explain how PTSMI, how our team dealing with this kind of challenge in any sectors, in any projects, in any GCA. I think the common approach that we always use is we are trying to find benchmark in other countries that this project or this sector has already succeeded for operation, succeeded for financial close. We are trying for the foreign equity and also debt. How do you see Indonesian outlook in the near short future? That's my first question. And my second question about the de-risking facilities. Pak Joko, you already mentioned about the risk allocation and also Pak Mr. Higgins. My question is, when you you participate in the RFP, in the RFQ, and PPP projects, did the committee or the GCA give you enough time to assess any kind of project documentations, any that already give in the RFP or the RFQ? This is my first question about the risking, and the second one maybe to Mr. Yoh and Pak Irman, also to Mr. Higgins. We know that IGF covers mostly on the political risk for the risking. For credit risks, do you see any product, is it market or government products, to cover the market risk? If not, do you see, do you need that? And what kind of market de-risking products that you feel it is a match for the Indonesian country risks for your equity investment or your debt exposure in Indonesia? That's my second question. And the third one about market sounding. I think you all already familiar with how Indonesia do market sounding in PPP. My question, is it enough for you, or do you expect more detailed information on the market sounding? And are you ready for the more detailed information? Because as I'm not wrong, you need also consultants to assess very detailed information. At a stage of market sounding, what kind of detail that I think will match between your expectation and also the government or the GCA ability to provide information in this stage? Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Delano. Thank you for the response. So maybe I would like to go to the panelists. The first one is regarding the outlook of the economic in these times of recessions, and the second one is regarding the de-risking, and the third one is the market sounding. How can we implement a better market sounding so that it would be more better streamlined in the implementations? Maybe the first one, maybe I'll go to Ben for the current economic outlook. And
sure, I think this is the million-dollar question for anyone. I think it's not only just for Indonesia. I'm not an economist, but I'll try my best. But
from the bank perspective.
From the bank's perspective, of course. Look, I think for us, Indonesia has always been interesting. We are heavily, I would say, heavily invested. We have entities here on the financing front, and when it comes to key country of focus from an Asia perspective, I think Indonesia ranks top of it, right? So I think the inflation issues that you have just mentioned, I don't think it's really specific to Indonesia. I think globally you see that as well, and everybody is kind of struggling to deal with it. So the way we see it is that eventually this would be kind of resolved down the road. Obviously, there will be some pain in the midterm, like with any other economy per se. But I think if you were to take a step back and take a broader view of the fundamentals and the key points of attraction for Indonesia for us, it's still there. It hasn't changed, just hyperinflation. You do have a strong growing economy, one of the biggest populations in Southeast Asia, and a young population. All of these elements and would actually make it continue to be attractive in the long term. So we don't see our interest dying down, to be honest. If anything, I think our interest will continue to remain strong or become even stronger as things progress, particularly on the political front.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I would like to hold Pak Delano's questions to the panelists later on, maybe, because I need to go to my second responder from PT Adikarya Persero, Pak Lazarus Bambang. Pak Lazarus is the GM of Business Development. Adikarya has the experience as a project company in PPP's project in Indonesia, which includes the Karyan water projects. Pak Bambang, I would like to ask about Adi's experience and also expectations in PPP projects in Indonesia, and also what kind of key success factors for a successful from your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Badio. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, in bahasa, speak in Indonesia, no problem?
Boleh, Pak.
Oke, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Perkenalan, nama saya Lazarus Bambang dari PT Adikarya. PT Adikarya adalah BUMN dan TPK, Persero dan TPK. Adikarya saat ini memang memiliki 4 lini bisnis, Pak. Yang pertama adalah construction, engineering and construction. Yang kedua adalah property. Yang ketiga adalah manufacturing, ya. Kita juga punya precast dan seterusnya. Yang keempat, investasi dan konsesi yang related PPP project. Nah, kami memiliki 3 sektor PPP project. Yang pertama sektor toll road, yang kedua non-toll, yang ketiga itu water and pengolahan limbah, ya, waste management itu. Kami juga punya waste management di Medan, di kawasan industri Medan. Ini related dengan Go Green Project, ya, yang tadi dibahas. Nah, terkait dengan water project atau PP project water adalah kami memang join dengan Key Water, mengerjakan project Karyan Water System di Tangerang. Nah, posisi kami memang mengerjakan di antara atau di tengah downstream scope and upstream scope. Nah, kami sedang dan terus bekerja mengerjakan scope kami, Pak, scope Adikarya atau scope Key Water atau KWS. Nah, kami berharap memang pengerjaan itu inland dan bisa finish bareng-bareng, Pak. Gitu kira-kira. Artinya apa yang kami kerjakan sebagai PP project bisa berjalan, upstream juga bisa berjalan, downstream bisa berjalan, sehingga nanti bisa beroperasi, kita perkirakan harapannya tahun 2025. Gitu. Sehingga nanti secara komersial bisnisnya bisa nyambung, karena ujung-ujungnya nanti akan bank juga yang akan mengevaluasi gitu. Itu terkait dengan PP project. Nah, untuk sementara kami belum ada pertanyaan, tapi ada 4 masukan, Pak Dio. Yang pertama adalah betul apa yang disampaikan oleh panelis tadi. Yang pertama itu kita harus ada risk sharing dan risk allocation yang jelas antara all parties, ya, terutama antara kita sebagai prefektor maupun mungkin dari owner atau PCPK-nya. Nah, selama ini memang kebanyakan risk allocation itu kebanyakan di kita, Pak, seperti sampaikan Pak Joko. Gitu. Jadi itu yang mungkin sehingga project itu menurut hemat kami kurang investor friendly, Pak. Gitu. Jadi kami berharap lebih investor friendly. Itu yang pertama. Yang kedua terkait land acquisition proses. Jadi memang sekarang sudah ada perbaikan, Pak Joko, yang tadi Bapak sebutkan terkait dengan land acquisition. Tapi kami berharap proses land acquisition itu inline dengan desain project kami maupun dengan construction timeline gitu, sehingga tidak spot-spot maupun tidak overlapping begitu, sehingga nanti dari timelinenya itu related semuanya, baik dari land acquisition, desainnya maupun constructionnya, sehingga nanti operationnya juga bisa staging begitu. Itu isu yang land acquisition. Yang kedua adalah masukan kami yang yang ketiga adalah terkait dengan visibility dan bankability. Nah, selama ini memang kata kunci, mohon maaf, terutama yang proyek yang solicited dan seterusnya, kami kebetulan punya solicited dan unsolicited, Pak. Jadi dari sisi visibility dan bankability itu menurut hemat kami memang ada yang proyek marginal, sehingga kami kesulitan di menghadap ke SMI, ke IF dan seterusnya. Itu yang mungkin menjadi kesulitan. Jadi kami juga punya threshold Pak, di BUMN itu juga punya threshold yang sehingga memang ada minimal IRR minimal gitu ya, kira-kira gitu. Itu yang ketiga. Yang keempat, isu funding Pak. Jadi hari ini atau ke depan itu memang PPP project, bahkan termasuk IKN nanti, itu sangat gencar, tapi sebetulnya kita semua punya isu besar, yaitu adalah masalah capacity financial. Bukan hanya di kami di private sector atau mungkin di badan usahanya, yang tentu juga punya limited capacity gitu ya, financial capacity juga terbatas. Yang kedua juga dari si banknya juga punya keterbatasan gitu, sehingga memang kita harus creative financing lah. Artinya kita semuanya harus mencari creative financing, itu kata kuncinya. Jadi jangan hanya cuman masalah pihak di kami, tapi di banknya juga punya limited capacity. Saya yakin juga mereka punya batasan-batasan yang sebetulnya kalau kita running project seperti disampaikan Pak Wamen, BUMN, Pak Tiko itu hari ini tuh atau tahun ini kita butuh 50 triliun, kita dari bank sendiri hanya cuma 30 triliun. Artinya 20 something triliun itu dari mana dananya gitu, sehingga kita harus punya financial engineering atau creative financing. Itu kira-kira masukan dari kami 4 itu. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Lazarus Bambang. I would like to go to our third responder from the province of West Java, Pak Irvan Rusdiansyah, to share his experience as acting as specifically as a GCA, and also how his expectation towards to support the projects and make it happen. Please, Pak Irfan.
Ya, thank you Pak Deo. Izin bahasa Pak ya?
Yes Pak.
Ya, terima kasih. Selamat pagi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Perkenalkan saya Irfan Rusdiansyah dari Divisi Infrastruktur Air Minum di Pemerintah Daerah Provinsi Jawa Barat. Jadi kami dalam proyek KPBU ini selaku PJPK menangani 2 proyek KPBU. Pertama untuk water supply system Jati Gede atau SPAM Jati Gede. Ini memang termasuk PSN juga atau proyek strategis nasional. Skemanya solicited, kami yang menginisiasi dan sekarang ada dalam tahap fasilitas penyiapan proyek oleh Kemenke, dalam hal ini didukung oleh PT SMB. Terima kasih Pak Delano senantiasa mendukung kami. Nilai investasi sendiri untuk SPAM Jati Gede itu sekitar 3,1 triliun. Semula 1,2 triliun pada saat KPBU hulu saja. Namun sekarang karena ada perubahan teknis dan hasil real demand survey juga, sehingga mekanismenya menjadi hulu hilir. Alhasil memang nilai investasinya atau capeknya menjadi naik ke ya sekitar 3,1 triliun. Kemudian yang kedua, kami juga punya proyek unsolicited untuk SPAM Regional Bandung Barat 1 atau SPAM Sinumbra. Ini memang diinisiasi pemrakarsanya oleh PT Waskita Karya Infrastruktur, konsorsium PT Waskita Karya Infrastruktur dengan PT Tirta Anugrah Utama. Nilai investasinya hulunya itu 800 miliar dan ternyata setelah kami teliti ini juga nilai investasi hilirnya kurang lebih sama, sekitar 800 miliar juga. Totalnya mungkin sekitar 1,7 triliun. Memang akhirnya terjadi kendala manakala konsorsium ini kemampuan finansialnya memang kurang memadai gitu. Akhirnya kami untuk yang unsolicited ini sempat merekomendasikan untuk membuka peluang menambah konsorsium gitu. Jadi dari 2 pengalaman kami sebagai PJPK Water Supply System di Jawa Barat, memang untuk penyelenggaraan SPAM regional ini pada akhirnya tergantung dari kesiapan dan kemauan optaker atau pemerintah daerah yang menjadi wilayah pelayanan. Karena kata kuncinya itu adalah di hilir sebagai pihak yang akan memanfaatkan dan membeli air curah yang tentunya kami salurkan ke daerah-daerah atau wilayah pelayanan. Dan memang ini sebetulnya dalam proyek KPBU bukan hanya kesiapan teknis saja, kemudian bukan hanya dukungan finansial dari Kemenkeu dalam hal ini VGF untuk yang proyek solicited, kemudian bukan juga hanya dukungan fiskal atau non fiskal dari kementerian sektoral, tapi memang komitmen dari pemerintah daerah. Contohnya memang dari kedua proyek SPAM ini tarifnya itu masing-masing yang Jati Gede itu sekitar 9.000, kemudian yang Sinumbra atau Bandung Barat 1 ini 6.000. Tapi kemampuan membeli air curah dari PDAM atau BUMD air minum di kabupaten kotanya memang sangat rendah. Dan kita juga terus mendorong untuk kenaikan tarif, namun sayangnya kenaikan tarif di Indonesia itu perhitungannya atau formulanya ditentukan sebesar 4% dari nilai UMK. Nah ini memang yang menjadi kendala Pak Dio. Dan mudah-mudahan dalam forum ini bisa menjadi catatan sebagai masukan untuk adanya perubahan formula dalam penentuan tarif air minum. Karena memang dari sisi pasarnya ini untuk KPBU memang perlu dilihat tadi kalau dari Adikarya dan SME juga memang sudah menyampaikan bahwa ini harus membuka peluang investasi yang sebesar-besarnya, otomatis hal-hal regulasi yang mendasarinya juga harus dilakukan perubahan. Barangkali hal itu yang mungkin bisa kami sampaikan, Pak Adio. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Irfan. Thank you. Thank you to all our respondents, which represents the project transaction, represents the private sector, and also the GCA. We have gone past our time limits, so I would like to take one Q&A from our online participants. We have questions from Siemens Bank's representatives. Tackling the foreign exchange mismatch risks in PPP projects that are paid in IDR, but their debt proceeds is in USD. How do you solve this issue of indexation and the tariff payments? I think this will go to IIF and SMBC probably. Please, Ben first, or Pak Irman first?
Yeah, I think my understanding is that the project's capital expenditure require foreign currency. Yeah, so that's why the project company raised that in US dollar, for example. So typically, project like this, project with foreign currency capex, the government contracting authority will also, will understand the risk and then therefore will reflect the risk in the risk allocation in the project agreement. As such, for example, the tariff setting will be linked to the currency index, for example. So that's we have seen that case, for example, in PLN's projects, right? And then we are also working in in municipal waste to energy project, for example, that also require foreign currency capex. So such scheme is actually possible, Pak, that this exposure is mitigated through the project agreement tariff settings. So that one, and then second is basically whether there is a market solution to hedge this foreign currency risk. To be frank, there is no long-term product, long-term facility that will be available in the Indonesia hedge such currency mismatch. But institution like at least like IIF, for example, we try to develop these solutions with the help of our stakeholders. So we'll see whether in the near future we will be able to provide such a product to the market. Working together with our stakeholders.
Thank you, Edman. Ben, please.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Giman. Thank you, Pak Tio. I think this is always a HO issue. Currency mismatch, especially when your debt and your revenue source is of different currencies. So I think succinctly put, Pak Giman has touched on all the key points. When it comes to indexation, basically resolved through project agreements, then the question really is who's actually taking the convertibility risk? Is it the government contracting agency or is it the sponsor, etc.? I think solutions by the private sector, as Pak Iman has mentioned, that there are solutions. Unfortunately, because of the way the financial markets are. You don't really have a long-term solution to this. If you look at, I think the one that comes to mind is like a cross-currency swap. But right now, I think intuitively, you're looking at perhaps a midterm of about 5 to 7 years in terms of the best liquidity. Anything beyond that becomes a bit of a challenge. So structurally, maybe from a debt perspective, I guess from a financier's perspective, what you can do is to try and, like, for example, structure a mini-perm kind of a structure where you kind of take a longer notional view because of the underlying project agreement being long-term. And then there's obviously that balloon at the end of the 5 or 7 years to kind of like structure in the CCS. But therein also has some issues, I would say, acceptability of the market, whether the market is ready to accept a mini-perm structure. We have seen this in other markets as well. So I think with a bit of education and a bit of prodding along, this may not be an unworkable solution in the Indonesian context as well.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Pak Herman. I would like to go to our live audience here, to our offline participants for any questions. So please, any participants in the venue. Well, most of the questions are online. Okay, so if for that, and we're close. Okay, so we have passed our time limit. So I would like to thank you to all of our panelists, Pak Joko, Pak Richard, Pak Herman, Pak Ben, and hope this session will be useful to all of us. So thank you again all. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Hello. Before we end the first session, we would like to invite Bapak Sri Bagus Guritno on behalf of the PPP Joint Office Secretariat to come to the stage and hand over the token of appreciation to the moderator and the panelists. By first handing over the token of appreciation to Bapak Deo Rawendra. The first token of appreciation to Bapak Deo Rawendra. The second token of appreciation is handed over to Bapak Joko Santoso. The third token of appreciation is handed over to Mr. Richard Higgins. The fourth token of appreciation is handed over to Bapak Imam Boyle. Last but not least, the fifth token of appreciation is handed to Mr. Benjamin Yo. Please give a round of applause to all the moderator and panelists for the insightful discussions and for participating in this forum. And now, ladies and gentlemen, if you could take your seats, we will move on to our next agenda, which is the second business review discussion, which will be moderated by the Director of Public Finance and Project Development from PT Sarana Multi Infrastruktur, Bapak Faris Pranawa. And for the panelists in this session, there will be the Principal PPP Specialist from Asian Development Bank, the first panelist will be the Principal PPP Specialist from Asian Development Bank, Mr. Dawal Jam, who will be with us virtually. And the next panelist is the Director of PT Aquatico Air Indonesia from Moya Group, Mr. Shahrun Sikar. And next up is the Executive Vice President of Corporate Development, PT Kardik Air Service Tbk, Bapak Iman Sinambela.
Tadi ada pertanyaan financing, saya ke Bapak ya.
And last but not least, please welcome the Associate Director, Infrastructure from HSBC Singapore, Mr. Roland Tan.
May I start? Okay, thank you, organizing committee. What an interesting session, yeah, this morning. Thank you, Pak Dio, for lively up the discussion in this morning. We hear a lot of honest inputs, if we cannot say it's criticism, but I believe our first session is really interesting, and we need to somehow answer those inputs and criticism. So now we're going to get more deeper, I believe, in three selected sectors by the organizing committee: water sectors, transportation, and health sector. I believe this three sector is really interesting, a lot of issues, and we ourselves involved in some of the project, and we really need to getting a real candid comment. This morning we have really experienced distinguished panelists. Pak Dawal, are you there, Pak? Can you listen to us?
Yes, thank you, Pak Faiz, and hello to everyone, and real apologies for not being able to make it in person, but thanks for inviting.
Thank you. Sector PPP project ya, Pak ya. And then the second panelist, Pak Shahrun Sikar. Pak Shahrun Sikar is from Moya or Aquatico. They manage a lot of water projects, so we can hear from Pak Shahrun. Pak Iman Sinambela from Kardik Air Services, also have at least, if I'm not mistaken, one PPP project, ya Pak ya. So real experience from the field, and then we can hear it later. And the last from lender side, Pak Roland, thank you Pak for your time. I have a directive from the organizing committee that I will not read your curriculum vitae. I'm really sorry, but I believe we already the audience can be guaranteed that this panelist is a very resourceful panelist. So let me jump directly to our discussion, considering the time left. So in this section, more or less, we are going to discuss acceptable business model, constraint and challenges, and the last recommendation for the 3 selected sectors. Yeah, and of course, lenders' perspective is really important. They are saying financing is not everything, but everything needs financing. So you are the most important. I'm not trying to put a pressure on you, but this is something that we really need to consider if we want to add private parties in our infrastructure project. So let's jump to the first subtopic, which is acceptable business model for PPP project. In hospital water supply and ask Pak Dawal for hospital, Pak Syahrun for water supply project, and Pak Iman for transportation. Maybe we can start.
Health sector PPPs, hospital PPPs have always been much more complex than infrastructure PPPs. And if we look at the pattern in how health sector has been adopted, to be implemented as PPPs, in most of the developing countries, we'll find a pattern that PPPs generally starts with roads and then goes into hardcore infrastructure, and then after there has been some success there, then it goes into health and hospital sector or social sector as such. So traditionally, it has been always the sector has always been complex, and it has some nuances, especially because it's a social sector and linked to human health. That's why there are some challenges which come up. In terms of acceptable models, there have been many models which have been adopted across the globe. The most common one is an infrastructure-only model, which is prevalent in all developed countries, UK, Canada, Germany, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, wherein it's very simple that the private sector comes in and develops and maintains public infrastructure, the hospital infrastructure, and the public sector is responsible for providing clinical services. And since the hospital infrastructure has been made available, there is a regular availability payment or an annuity payment which is made to the private partner, to the concessionaire. Well, that is a successful model, but if we look at the data a bit deeply, then we'll see that the availability of clinical staff and non-clinical staff both is very different in all these countries where this has been successfully implemented. One example, if I may take, is UK, where most of the PPPs in hospital have been implemented, more than 100. There, the average number of doctors per 1,000 population is 3.8, if I'm correct, definitely more than 3. And the average number of doctors per 1,000 population, I mean, this metric is called doctor density, is in Indonesia is 0.5. So, I mean, the outcome of this is that for every 1,000 people, there are 6 times more doctors in the UK, 6 to 7 times more doctors in the UK than in Indonesia. So if infrastructure is built, the next question is there enough staff available to run the facilities? And that's where, again, the dichotomy between public and private sector, retention of human resources in health sector comes into play. And traditionally, again, because of better incentives and remuneration, the private sector has been able to retain more staff in the clinical field. And of course, there is also staff which move out to other countries for in search of better avenues. So, in short, the infrastructure model, the infrastructure only model is, but I would say in lesser cases than more, and only in cases where it is ensured that the public entity is able to provide clinical services. And so then come the other models, which is, for example, a clinical model where a private sector is involved to provide clinical services. If infrastructure is already available, then it can be an operations and management contract. Otherwise, it could be an integrated PPP where private sector provides both infrastructure and clinical services. However, again, sometimes the issue that comes up is that clinical services is something which the government would want to retain in-house. In that case, a hybrid model can also be taken wherein private sector has its own section where it provides clinical services and public sector can provide clinical services on its own. In these models where private sector can be included for clinical services, the availability payment can be reduced because a lot of cross-subsidization and user payment mechanisms. So we can discuss this in detail, but I'll stop for now and hope it answers the question.
Thank you. Pak Dawal mentioned 3 models with its own issues and concerns. Let me move to the second sector, water supply. Pak Syahrun, could you please share, Pak, your perspective on what is the acceptable business model? Thank you, Pak.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Faris. In Moya, we have also the what KPBU or PPP, and in our experience now we are having this model and run successfully. So PPP is I would say also maybe one of the solution, to get the better coverage services for the community in Indonesia. Being the biggest in Indonesia also, Moya is only able to serve only 8 million people. So the chance is still there, still big, and even in Moya that we're not only doing PPP, but also we're doing the B2B and also the concession, but the concession is not any longer applied now. But back to PPP again, that so far that we able to cooperate well with all the stakeholders, and again that PPP maybe that can be increased, in order to have the access 100% of the clean water in 2024. And for that is Moya is really happy to be participate in the any PPP project to come.
Okay, thank you, Pak Syahrun. Pak Syahrun mentioned that they have PPP, they have B2B in their portfolio. So this is the business model that are acceptable, unless concession, because it's not permittable, Okay, thank you. Pak Iman, could you please share from the view of transportation or logistic sector, please, Pak?
Yeah. Thank you, Pak Faris. So from Indonesia is an archipelago country, so it has to be supported by sea or air. So the development of, if I may speak, at the air transport sector is also important, currently we only have 3 major airports that have significant international traffic, which is the Cengkareng, Surabaya, and Bali Denpasar. So I think based on this, then the development. So airport is infrastructure that cannot stand alone. It has also depending on other airports as well as the traffic from the airlines and local area. So for PPP airport project to be successful, it has to also followed by development of other airports, not only the main airport but secondary airports. So the business model can be different among the airports. Let's say if we can divide it into 2 airports, the main airport that can be a hub of traffic. The business model of BOT and also the other one is the contract management with the government can also be applied. The BOT is where the government would like to expand the airport and also improve the traffic as well as the service to the airport. And the contract management to the brownfield if the airport is already built, but it requires connectivity, so route development from other airports as well. And also the service business model can be applied to this airport. Now, in the secondary airport, it's probably need more support from the government because it's less less developed and less economics. But the big airport needs supply from this smaller airport. Yeah, so that's why the business model would be a bit different, in which a government support will be required. For example, like availability payment in that smaller airport. So with this connectivity, I guess the airport, not only main airport, the secondary airport can also grow. We know that Indonesia domestic GDP is quite high or steady. So we can take advantage of this, what you call it, the income growth, and also people who depending on air transport to be mobile, to go everywhere, to travel. I think that's my.
Thank you, Pak Iman. So basically, airports business model depends on each of the airport itself. At least 2 business model, which is BOT and contract management, and then for the airport that have less economic value, and then government support also needed. Is it can be also in form of VGF? Is it workable for airport?
Yes, but if in terms of financing would be different. So if availability payment probably would be more feasible for financing purpose.
Okay, thank you, Pak Iman. Okay, now let's move to lender's perspective. I understand that there is a lot of business model, and I think it's specific for the characteristic of or type of each infrastructure. But Roland, what are with regards to business model for hospital, water supply, and transportation sector in Indonesian PPP, please?
Yeah, so I think each of these sectors are very different. I think something that lenders look for is something that's very consistent regardless of sector, is who is the one that's paying the availability payment, like who is the off-taker. So for that, I think it's good that we have IIGF. I think it gives assurance that there's a guarantor behind the payment, and I think that will give lenders a lot of comfort that ultimately we get our money back, because as financiers, we are very simple. Actually, we just want our money back at the end of the day. So this is something that I think is very relevant to all the PPPs in these different sectors.
Okay, thank you, Pak. So the pressure moved to Pak Andre, Pak. Not in the lender's side. Now, Pak Andre will play a bigger role, especially on the development in the market that's still in development stage, ya Pak ya. So government support is really needed to attract private sectors. Okay, the third question is, do you, this is for all panelists, do you have any inputs or regulatory improvement that come in mind to ensure that the PPP or development of PPP in Indonesia will be better? Maybe I'll ask Dawal first, and then I'll go through the rest of the panelists. Pak Dawal, do you have any input with regards to institutional and regulatory improvement? I think you're the first part, please.
Sure, Pak. Well, I mean, I would start by saying that already there has been some improvement which is made in the regulation in the recent past, and especially the part which I was talking about of including clinical services, and as PPP has been now put in very clearly in the policy. Having said that, I mean, having more integration with VGF, more guarantees coming from higher up in the government, use of hybrid models of payments, all these things can be very clearly integrated into the regulatory framework, and that would help improve PPP structuring in health sector.
Okay, thank you, Pak. Let me move to Pak Patient, of course. Do you have any input for institutional and regulatory improvement, Pak?
Yeah, for I think for PPP in air transport to be successful as well, it requires coordinating and also transparency from the beginning of the project. So I think the preparation is important, but also the execution is important. But we need a coordinator for both stages and also up to the operating. This is important because there is a gap of information sometimes when during this preparation, market sounding, and also during the executions, and also during the operations. In terms of regulatory as well, the aviation sector, it's sensitive for the volatility. So I think there are some probably flexibility also, if we can see in terms of project scope, and also the time of the project can also be considered.
Okay, thank you, Pak Iman. So basically, this is relates to our first discussion in the morning. Pak Irman said that project leadership is important throughout the project, because there's many risks. PPP project, of course, will took a long term, and then leadership is needed, ya Pak ya. Okay. Thank you. Pak Syahrun, for water sector, do you have any inputs with regards to institutional and regulation, Pak Syahrun?
Yeah, I would say that the strong commitment of government is needed, yeah. And in our experience running a few water treatment plant, yeah, one of the biggest concern is the commitment on the tariff, Pak. So tariff, we call it tariff adjustment, but unfortunately, always adjustment related to increasing of the tariff. So if I mean that in the agreement, we already agreed that certain time we will do it, but in the end, that this is the commitment is still not there, Pak. So it's really sometimes is a risk for us also.
Yes. Okay, agree, Pak. Tariff is quite, how do you say, it's getting more political rather than just financial, ya Pak ya. Actually, yesterday I just talked with one of the major, and he said, yes, our PDAM should improve the connection without increasing the tariffs. And I say, how come? Okay, Pak Roland, do you have of course, from perspective lenders, with regards to institutional and regulation for PPP project in Indonesia. Please, Pak. Please, Pak.
Yeah, I think it's been covered by the earlier session or by the other panelists as well. I think it's more of like land acquisition. Like I think the party which is best suited to take the risk should take the risk. More coordination and as to the point I alluded to earlier, like who is the one paying. So if it's a regional government that lenders who have no quality, then perhaps IGF can come in as a guarantor. If it's the central government paying the tariff, then I don't think we need IGF. So I think if more thought can be put into it in the structuring phase, I think that will make the projects a lot more appealing to international lenders also.
Yes, agree, Pak. Okay. So basically, risk allocation is still important. I think this is the how do I say, theory that we already know maybe a decades ago, but to be consistent to applying in every project, this is the challenge. Okay, I think for first subtopic we conclude already, and then let's move to the second subtopic, which is constraint and challenges in implementing PPP project. The first questions are, what are the constraints and challenges in the implementation of each sector in PPP in Indonesia? This is our share their view more deeper from each sector. Pak Dawal, as usual, I'll ask you for your first response from hospital or health sector, Pak, and then I go to Pak Iman and then Pak Syahrun. Pak Dawal, your time is yours, Pak.
Thanks, Pak Faris. I would, I mean, there's a lot which can be said, but let me try to summarize it that previous attempts in Indonesia for hospital PPPs have generally come up with affordability issues in terms of availability payments as the key challenge. And to resolve that, one is where does the money come from, which, as I said, more VGF support, which can be clearly defined, can help. But also in terms of how a project is structured, as Mr. Tan was also raising up that at structuring stage, we put in a lot of thought and process to make a bankable project. And so one challenge which comes up, or one usual thing which is followed, is people take the best practices from developed countries, and well, they should be taken, but cannot be straight away applied to Indonesia without tailoring them to the local health systems. And so a hospital design which is made for Australia or Canada, it's made for certain reasons in those countries, but if we use exactly the same process and same costings, then the overall cost of the hospital in Indonesia will also turn up to be very high. And I have seen hospital feasibility projects which have been developed within Indonesia, and the cost is massively different. In fact, one thing I've seen is about 1/5 of what was estimated by using international standards. So that's one. The other also I would say is that in terms of defining what the scope of the project is, in terms of having a realistic scope of services or scope of equipment, because medical equipment is quite expensive, and so we have to be very rational and very thoughtful of what equipment is really required. There are many more challenges, as I said, we can talk more about it, but as of now, the immediate challenge in Indonesia is this high cost structure, and there are a few methods by which it can be brought down.
Okay, well said, Pak Dawal. Affordability and the scope of the project, that's the two most pressing constraints. Pak Syahrun, could you please share your perspective on constraint and challenges, Pak, in water sector?
Yes, in water sector, I would say that the constraint is, and until now, is still very difficult to solve it. That the readiness of the PDIM itself to absorb the water, because now the private is only allowed on the upstream side, which is only production. But and then whenever we finish the production, and then the PDM cannot absorb the water, that would be very difficult for us. So it's really that we're hoping that there is some kind of the synergic, between upstream and downstream, in order to absorb the water produced. And also another constraint that some of the area based on the RDS, that the willingness of connect is there, but and then they never use the water, so it become like a zero consumption. That also very difficult because we cannot charge the water to the zero consumption. Yeah, that's his our
I'm interested in Pak Syahron in zero consumption. Do you know why is that case happening, Pak? Are they still using water from what's the cause, Pak?
Yeah, there is two kinds of the zero consumption. Firstly, because of the groundwater, is still very good, the quality, and also some is only there by the house, or the ruko, only as the investment. So they never really use the water for it.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Pak. That's a real experience from the ground. Thank you, Pak. Next, Pak Iman, could you please share your view on constraint and challenges on transportation or logistic, please, Pak?
From our perspective, some of the challenges that we're facing is again the project preparations. Come to that again, it's really need to be very solid in terms of creating a robust business plan with solid assumptions, because this is required when we go to the next step, to the financing. So when we approach for the financing for the project, then of course another due diligence has to take place again, and then it will challenge the previous assumptions and probably require some adjustment in terms of the project economics. So it was brought up in earlier sessions that if financing institution can be involved at the beginning of the project to see the feasibility or bankability of the project, then it could be speed up the process of the closing, financial closing. And secondly, some of the constraints that we foresee is that because when we speak about the airport, it's a central government airport assets, but there is also involvement of the local government. So synchronicity policy also has to be managed by the GCA, so that there is no backward policy that created by local government, not supportive to the intentions for the traffic in certain areas.
Ya, Pak, ya. Okay. The last question for this subtopic, we will ask Pak Roland on lenders' view for these three sector, Pak: hospital, water supply, and transportation. Do you have any idea how to face or to deal with those constraints mentioned by our panelists, Pak? Maybe lenders have some kind of appetite or ways to manage those constraints, Pak.
Sure. So maybe I'll just touch on the transport sector, because I think this area I'm more familiar with. I think we got approached by a client, I think to finance a greenfield airport in Indonesia. It's actually very challenging for banks to take the risk because you have to bank, I think, the growth assumptions, the passenger growth assumptions, which we don't really have visibility on. So because we are different from equity will take the upside. We don't take the upside, so we are very concerned about downside. So I think the way to get around it is really what we are seeing in other regions is that availability-based payment will work. So again, I think it goes back to the point, who is the party that is best placed to take on, risk, in this case, the passenger growth risk. I think lenders can't take on that risk, especially for a greenfield project with a lack of track record. So that's where I think availability payment will be very helpful. Yeah.
Okay, so basically demand risk should be managed by the government, yeah, and then consequently, user pay is less acceptable. Government pay will be more acceptable for the lenders' point of view in the form of
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I think we conclude the second subtopic with regards to constraint and challenges. Our panelists mentioned many constraints and challenges, I believe, and then with those lessons of or those issues, our panelists from lenders said that in maybe most of these three sectors, availability payment is a way to deal with those constraints. Okay, next we go to the third subtopic, which is specific topics for each sector. I think it's getting more deeper, yeah. Okay, the first questions for our panelists. If you have any idea, you can share it to us. On your institution view regarding green investment, I believe in the first session we already discussed it. For health sector, transportation, and water, I believe this is also one of the issues that come out lately. What is your view on green investment? Do you have any project in your portfolio, or are you already exploring on invest in green investment? Maybe Pak Dawal, could you respond on this? I believe ADB have a great interest with regards to green investment. Pak Dawal?
Yes, Fafaris. So the simple straight answer is a very big yes. ADB is very supportive of green investments, and in fact, after the Paris meeting, we have been completely aligned with the Paris Accord there, and so we are looking as a very active strategy to invest and to get involved more and more in climate friendly investments, and even in terms of transaction advisory, we advise our government clients on all the methods where climate friendly components can be introduced into the project. So again, as a summary, it's a resounding yes, a big yes from our side, that we completely support green investments.
Okay. Do you have any specific issues for health sector with regards to green investment?
Well, not really. There are design parameters which can be included in in health sector, in hospital designs and all, which are climate friendly. And how it helps is that even from a health perspective, the climate friendly options are more healthy, in terms of better aeration, better lighting, and all those things. So it fits in very well within health sector too.
Okay, thank you, Pak Dawal. Interesting on how health sector could also cater the green investment needs. Yeah, thank you, Pak Iman. Do you have any view on this green investment trend? May I say?
Yes, of course. In our company's policy, I think green and sustainability is the way for futures. So that's why we are exploring at the moment on how to apply this into the businesses. For example, the airport is a very wide open space. Then you can take advantage of maybe solar and also recycled water for this initiative. I think those are some examples that we can explore at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Pak. So basically, adding green aspect in your existing project, ya, Pak. Ya. Airports have big opportunity to put solar panels in its project. Yeah, that's the example. Pak Syahrun, do you have any view on green investment in water sector, Pak?
Yes, we have a very strong willingness for this green, yeah, and the water treatment plant is consume a lot of electricity, and we are now trying to do more deeper and seriously that to also have this solar panel, yeah, on the treatment plant, and also that mini hydro is also one of our target, because this is in some places where maybe the raw water is high up in above the sea level. So, and then while the treatment plant is in the lower side, yeah, maybe that we can use that pressure also to generate electricity in the mini hydro. So, in other words, that the green energy is one thing that we are really looking very seriously.
Okay, interesting, Pak. With regards to adding energy in your water project, Pak. Really looking forward if you have any project succeeded, could you please share it to us in the future, Pak?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, now to Pak Roland. How green a project should be from a lender's perspective, right? This is, I believe, quite. I'm also our institution also a lenders, and I believe if we're talking about ESG, it's more to third scope, yeah, Pak. Not really pressing now, but I don't know. What is HSBC view on this? Please, Pak Roland.
Yeah, then maybe I'll just say that I think green is an important priority for HSBC institution. I think we put out a public statement that a certain proportion of our, I think, balance sheet needs to be a green by a certain time frame. So without a doubt, I think it's definitely a very important strategic priority for us. So I would love to do a green project in the hospital and the transportation sector. So we could something as simple as, like, using energy saving technology in hospital, putting solar panels on airport, not airport. I think that will really send a strong message that the country is committed to be green, and I think that will make it a lot very appealing to financiers like ourselves.
Okay. Could it be cheaper, Pak Roland, if we put green?
That's $1 million question.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's possible because I think we are seeing signs that if the project is not green, certain lenders are not able to participate.
Yes.
So if it's green, you definitely attract more liquidity from a market.
They say it's not a premium, but a greenium, yeah, Pak.
Yes.
The terms, if you do a green project and then you get a discount for the interest rate, and they call it's greenium.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Pak. Interesting. So the second question, what is the workable mechanism to strengthen PDAM capacity in increasing the absorption rate of water produced by PPP water supply? I believe this is question is for Pak Syahrun and Pak Roland. If you have any idea, if you have any experience with regards to this, is specific to Indonesia, Pak Syahrun. We understand that Pak Syahrun already mentioned that Indonesia have issue with regards to synchronization between upstream and downstream. Our downstream are managed by PDAM, and we already know that I believe there are maybe 388 PDAM in Indonesia, yeah, and then only 5, if I'm not mistaken, in form of corporation or perseroan terbatas. The rest is still in Perumda. That's a public service corporation. So, with regards to this issue, Pak Syahrun, do Moya have any idea how to increase PDAM capacity to absorb water for PPP project? Could you please share your perspective, Pak?
Yes, learning from our operation that with some our treatment plant has been produced the water, and there is no capability to absorb, and then we are try to have a solution where we also investing money on the distribution pipe, yeah. And this is what we call it like a BOT plus, Pak.
Okay.
Yeah, because we also have to secure that the water produced has to be absorbed, yeah. And we are offering this to some Pemda, yeah, or the municipality or the agency, if they agree, and then we will do the investment for distribution, or we also come up with the scheme, we call it bundling project, Pak. So we're trying to put everything, yeah, in one package, yeah, and then of course we will charge the project, yeah, as the what we call it as the water charge, yeah, which is covering all the investment we have done, yeah, from the upstream to the downstream. But again, that only on the investment, because the operation still has to be done by PDIM, Pak, on the downstream side there.
Okay, so basically you address the investment needs, but the operation of this facility still needs to be, how do you say, Pak, monitor or influence or? Yes, okay.
Yeah, by PDIM, Pak.
By
Yeah,
PDIM.
yeah.
And how do you manage those operational risks, Pak? You just
Yeah, that our risk, Pak.
Okay, okay, thank you. Pak Roland, do you have any view on how Moya try to manage these issues through BOT plus or bundling mechanism? I don't know whether you have any experience on this.
Yeah, I think it was very comprehensive, so I don't have anything to add. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Pak Roland. Okay, next question. What transaction scheme can be proposed to fulfill project feasibility in transportation PPP in the context of logistic or connectivity? Pak Iman, do you have any idea onto how to reach? You already mentioned previously, but could you please elaborate more on how we can fulfill more project feasibility, Pak?
Yeah,
Please,
thank you, Pak Faris. In addition to some schemes that mentioned earlier about the brownfield project, greenfield project, as well as the contract management and BOT, I think the scope of the airport is also can be what you call it, enticed if we can see not only the airport itself. I mean, airport is gateway. If it grows, then the economic of the surroundings also grow. So in that sense, we can also do the transactions, probably not only the airport, but also the what you call it, Aeropolis, something like that, because to be able to grow, the supporting facility will be required. For example, for cargo, the warehouses, the line to warehouses, one in the airport and one supporting just near the airport for consolidations and also for sorting area. This is will increase the visibility of the airport and also increase the flights, as well as the for passengers, probably hotels and commercial area also can be improved. If this is in one, let's say, party, which is the one that we awarded to develop the airport, it can be easy for them to manage the traffic, and also it probably can lessen to less the risk of passengers. It can be, average the loss from the probably the volatility in traffic can get some compensation from this commercial area and warehousing, which will grow not linear with the airport, but also to surrounding area. Those are some transaction scheme that we have in mind in terms of the airport development at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Pak Iman. So basically, I believe we see this in when we have pandemic last year. Yeah, cargo is better than.
Yeah, that's correct. We only experience 2 months cargo below the pre-pandemics. So I think within the 3rd month or 6 months after the April, so it's increasing significantly because people buy from online.
Yes,
It has to be delivered anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, private sectors have more flexibility or creativity also with regards to facing the risk, yeah, because they're the one who manage those risks. So from government perspective, I believe we must some kind of flexibility for private partners to manage this project. Yeah, I think that's one of the key important issues, and I believe this is the reason why one of the reason why government do PPP project, yeah, to obtain creativity from private sectors. Okay, thank you, Pak Iman. Now let's move to one of the important issues, which is financial closing. In Indonesia, for PPP project, we have 12 months period for financial closing. At the first session, we discussed a little bit with regards to step-out financing. So the question is, what are the the question is how we can expedite financial closing process of PPP project in Indonesia. Do you have any idea whether step-out financing can answer these questions? Or no? Maybe all panelists can answer this question if you have any idea, including Pak Dawa. If you have any idea, please, do you have any response for this question? Maybe Roland, do you have any idea with regards to the how we can expedite the financial closing?
Yeah, so I think it's a real life experience because HSBC, we were working on the satellite PPP last year. So the Satra satellite, I think it took a while to reach financial close. So I think looking back, I think what would be very helpful is, as what the other panelists mentioned in the earlier session, I think to get lenders involved in the process as soon as possible. Because for the Satra satellite, I think there was one ECA, one multilateral and 3 international banks, and each of them have different requirements. This is also I think for most of them, the first time they look at the Indonesia PPP transactions. So getting them involved in the process, getting them look at the documentations before it's signed is very helpful. Because I think the reason why financial close was delayed was because we need to explain to the lenders why we accepted the risk, and when that document cannot be changed anymore because it has already been signed by the sponsor. So yeah, I think that's my input.
Okay, thank you, Pak Roland. The other panelists, do you have any additional idea on how to expedite the financial process, financial closing process?
If I may,
yes.
Yeah. So I think what Pak Roland mentioned earlier is very valid. I mean, involving the financial institution at the very beginning is critical to expedite the financial closing, because the financial closing is also subject to the expectations of the sponsors, and also what can the financial institution bring to this project. Sometimes the sponsor would require, let's say, non-recourse financing, and what can be done in also the documents agreement with the bank, as well as the contract with the contract concession agreement or cooperation agreement with the government. So if this can be anticipated earlier, then it would be
yes. Logically,
yeah.
if you're talking about financial closing, lender's perspective must be get upfront. Yeah. Okay. Considering the timing today, I would like to move to responder perspective on this issue. We have Pak Andre from PII, Pak Steve from Korea for Organ, and Pak Norman from Marubeni. I believe we have a lot of quite heavy materials in this session, yeah. So especially on these three sectors, we have appetite, we have inputs, and I would like to also get a response from these three distinguished institutions. The first are PII. PII are Indonesia Infrastructure Guarantee Fund. So basically, our company and PII already involved for the last decade, and we see a lot of success, a lot of failure. I believe Pak Andre is the right person to respond to our discussion, especially with regards to the water project, hospital, or others. Yeah, but water project, maybe we have a lot of stories. So Pak Andre, I would like to ask your perspective on this matter, please. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you so much, Pak Faris. Good day, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi. Really glad to have to be invited in this distinguished event and panels. And I think the three sectors that has been discussed and presented just now, and listening and noting, taking notes for some views and opinions from all the panelists, and also understanding what has been delivered in the earlier panel. I think first we realized that the PPP in Indonesia still needs certain level of efforts and more supports in terms of heading to the next level. But I think before that, let me just highlight and give credit to Indonesia's PPP, as we are probably sharing that we have already around more than 30 PPPs in many sectors. And I think the total investment value has been reaching more than $30 billion. And we are glad, as government guarantee provider in IGF, we have contributed to most of them. Not all of them, and I think I will tell you why. Because first of all, when we are supporting PPPs, what we are trying to show is that we're not only being the financing enabler for lenders like Mr. Roland there, and probably from SMBC and other lenders like SMI, but also we are having other roles as a project or GCA enabler, because we are really, as probably mentioned earlier, there are some capacity issues and project structuring issues. So we are involved in much earlier stage, like even in the planning stage, and also for ecosystem enabler. So what we are trying to get some understanding, awareness from different stakeholders that will be supporting our PPPs. And if we look at on the implementation of these three sectors, which is actually we already have it in our pipelines, but those who are already under our portfolio for implementation for guarantee effectiveness, we have already the water sectors. We have some of them, many of them actually, and we actually even get our first claim just few months this year from one of the water sector. This is from Bandar Lampung project, and I think the main reason was that because the GCGation, so that's why the project companies submitted their claim, and we already paid the claim.
and we have also other projects in other level, because Lampung is the one in municipal level. We have two other levels. First, on the provincial level, we have Umbulan, and we also have, for instance, and we have on the central government level, we have Jatiluhur and also Karian water project. So with this exposures of having quite many water projects, and probably I should also mention what Pak Sahrun has been involved in one of the project in water sector in Semarang. I think this has been one of the example for the successful one. We should give credit on that, and this is something that we can see that the spectrum of complexity of the sectors is really related to the government capacity itself, the GCA, Government Contracting Agency, and we could also take note on the complex project structure. I think earlier has been discussed on how, let's say, we have a different responsibilities for upstream facilities like intake facility, also the production facility, which mostly use PPP for the upstream. Sometimes they use government support from construction support from the Minister of Public Works, for instance, that can be sourced also from the government loans, from multilaterals. And we have on the downstream on the responsibility of the water utility projects on the regional level. So this, even in the same project, we have three different responsibilities that has been quite complex in terms of the interface between them, and sometimes the schedule of implementation is not synchronized. So this has been also the headache for us as a guarantor, not to mention also for the lenders actually. So this has been something that we need to take care from the early stages, how we should synchronize, not to mention the issue of the tariff setting, the target setting, the revenue, the business plan, the revenue targets, the non-revenue water, and some of the things that sometimes that it's not being balanced to the capacity of the PDAM for them to achieve in the business plan. So this is something that we need to really look into more details from the beginning, to have them have the right motivation, the right personnel, the right capacity for them to implement. And the other probably one aspect that we should not forget to mention is that they still somehow need the approval from the local parliaments.
Yes.
So this complexity of the issue are there, and we as a guarantor, we should really look into the detail on the project structuring, on the risk allocation, and somehow developing the right guarantee structure is something that we somehow could not what should we say, that we should follow the regulations, because we
yes, there are many limitations how to structure this this water project. Yeah, okay. Yes. Thank you, Pak Andrew. Really valuable knowledge. But I believe we also here in this room we have a lot of people responsible. I'm not sure I can mention responsible, but we have a lot of knowledge, and I believe we can took those knowledge to better prepare the next project, ya, Pak, ya. And not to mention there are still many options that the central government put with regards to how to make this water project. One question, Pak Andre. Could PII provide guarantee to business to B2B water project? Is it already available in IIGF facility? Because previously Pak Syahrun also mentioned that one of the ways to manage the water project for the quick wins, ya, maybe Pak Syahrun, ya, B2B is one of the way to manage the existing ecosystem. Is it possible to guarantee?
Okay, thank you, Pak Faris, for the question. I think this is very fundamental, and I think I should say that, first of all, principally or in essence,
IGF guarantee is sovereign guarantee, provided actually sourced from Ministry of Finance, from Government of Indonesia, but channeled through IGF. And so far our mandates for the guarantee is to support the government to business kind of transaction. So for the business to business, I think one thing that we can support not only through the not through the guarantee, but we have also a function or a unit that can facilitate the needs for the effort for, let's say, having advisory for project structuring, the risk advisory, and somehow for the capacity building, we can also do through our IGF Institute. So this is something that, although by the mandate is not possible to be done, because
Yes,
as a fiscal instrument,
yes.
So it's supposed to help the government.
Okay, this is also including, I believe this is also a gray area in water sector. Yeah,
Yeah.
water is supposed to be provided by the government, but
Yes.
in certain, I believe in Indonesia, all of the municipal government delegated to a business
water
entity.
utility.
So this is make it
Yeah.
quite a gray area.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Andre, for your
No worries,
response.
thank
And,
you.
next, from Korea, Pak Steve, do you have any opinion on the transaction structure and mechanism that are acceptable by the developers in preparing unsolicited scheme project in these three sectors? Please, Pak Steve.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Steve.
In short, in theory, for the water supply project, in theory, guarantee and non-recourse finance are important, but in practice, different story. Therefore, if the distribution to household scope is open for private investor, or especially through PPP scheme, I don't know, but the structure and maybe some expert here can be explored through PPP scheme. So it will be attracted to the Marubeni or foreign investor, I believe.
Yes.
Because of downstream scope or CC hilir, management and having attractive distribution services, etc., is required very much and know-how. So this is my comment, and thank you for
Thank you,
this
Pak
kind of
Norman.
opportunity.
I think it's great input and honest and candid comment. Yeah. 3 points from Pak Norman. The first as guarantee. Pak Norman also asked us whether it's meet the international lender standards. I believe Roland earlier already said it's acceptable, but I don't know whether Roland have any additional comments. The second is take or pay, which is not really effective in Indonesia. And the third are non-recourse. Pak Norman also asked SME. Fortunately, I'm here not as SMI, but as moderator. So I'll ask Pak Irman or our colleagues from lenders maybe can respond. Maybe I can add something, Pak, with regards to the non-recourse mechanism. So I'll ask Pak Roland whether you have any additional comment on how our government guarantee structure can be accepted from lenders, international lenders.
Yeah, I think in short it can. I think like looking back on the experience with the Satra satellite, I think it did take a while to get some of the ECAs on board with IRGF, but eventually we got there. So I guess in terms of, to your question, in terms of area of improvement is really I think the level of coverage, because sometimes IRGF does not cover 100% of the termination payment. So I think as international lenders, and I think we do want it to be 100% in line with other countries that we have seen. Yeah.
So you can can those guarantee be affected to the rating, Pak? I believe this guarantee will influence the rating of the project, because in my understanding, international lenders try to apply project financing compared to corporate loan. Okay, thank you, Pak. So it's in some certain point it's acceptable, Pak Norman. And for the second question, non-recourse. In my understanding, in Indonesia, some of the lenders already try to apply project financing, Pak, starting from the rating mechanism, rating tools, and then through the execution. And then what I see is that non-recourse is quite hard because the concession itself is not really how do you say compatible with true non-recourse or project financing mechanism. So we still accept limited recourse, Pak Norman. But as you said previously, for the bigger size, this will be an issue. Yeah. So basically, to be able to provide non-recourse financing, I believe the concessions is also important, concession agreement, Pak. So I'm taking extra role as a panelist, not only as a moderator, to answer this question. So let me move to question from participant. I also note that Pak Bastari, I believe Pak Bastari also here. Pak Bastari is our, how do you say, one of the influencer in PPP project. Noted, Pak, we need to listen to the private sector more to create more PPP pipelines. But we also have a question from Pak Yoga Adiprabowo. This is to all panelists. From the investor point of view, which part of PPP stages that need to be simplified? Thus, the contract structure could be more interesting. So, quick answer, Pak Iman, Pak Sahrun, Pak Roland, and Pak Dawal, if you're still here. Which part of PPP stage that need to be simplified? Pak Sahrul ada apa?
Yes, learning from the PPP we are participated that this is a very long process for us. Yeah, so maybe needs more than 1 year. Yeah, sometimes also almost 2 years. Yeah, but this is because this is the system. Yeah, I mean that PPP has to go through a lot of the staging, and so far that we always trying to do the cooperation with PDIM based on the B2B if they accept it. Yeah, and which is also actually PDIM also happy because very simple and very quick.
Yes.
So maybe I would say that maybe if somehow that the process can be shortened, that will be maybe more attractive.
Yes, thank you, Pak Syahrun. Pak Syahrun also echoing Pak Yoga concern that PPP stage needs to be simplified, Pak. Pak Iman, do you have any idea on this matter?
In our experience, I think the current process, we understand that the process has to be comply with other regulations and also follow input from stakeholders. So want to simplify this, then it has to be coordinated institutions that can channel these concerns, and also in terms of during the negotiation and informations process. Okay. I think that's something that can be
improve. Yeah.
To improve.
Okay. Communication is key, and I hope with the clear communication both ways, so the process could also be simplified automatically. Yeah, with clear communication. Parolan, do you have any perspective on this?
Yeah, I think the procurement process, I think can be simplified. So I think to the point I made earlier, I think it's helpful to get financiers in, even at the bid stage before the bid is submitted. so you can ensure there are no surprises, right? So to
Okay.
speak, after you have been awarded the contract. So
Yes.
I think that can really expedite the process significantly.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Roland. Pak Dawal, if you don't have any comments, Pak Yoga, I hope you can take notes on this response from the panelists, and I would like to move to the last questions. This is to Pak Syahrun with regards to I believe this is Moya project ya Pak ya, from Batam Citizen. They don't provide any names, I believe. So how is Moya Indonesia will give impact better than old company to Batam for at least the 5 first years, Pak Sahrun? Do you have any statement on this?
Yes, maybe the question were at least for the first 5 years, ya Pak ya. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe the question is for at least the first 5 years. Yes. Yeah, this is what we just awarded contract for operation in Batam for the next 15 years. Yeah, and Batam is developed very quick, so the requirement or the demand for water is increasing. So and then what we see that from the technical point of view, that a lot of the improvement and also in the piping system, and also we have to upsizing the pipe, which is that would be need time and effort. Yeah, and maybe so far that we don't investing big money for this. Yeah, but. Of course, that on the first 5 years, I guarantee that Moya can improve the water service in Batam.
Okay, thank you, Pak. A great statement, ya, Pak. Ya, guarantee that better services could be provided by Moya. And the last question, Pak Sahrun, this is question from IIF. How is investor appetite on the potential availability payment model on PPP water supply business? This is performance-based contract. So what's Moya appetite on the availability payment, Pak?
We are also now looking for the performance-based contract scheme, Pak. So basically that if this is something doable, yeah, and then also that not what's the word, not creating big loss, yeah. So we will do, but performance-based contract now is maybe getting popular in some new project, and we trying to apply it as well.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. I hope the question is already answered. So we come to the end of this. Oh, sorry. Are there any question from participant in the venue? Sorry, I forgot to ask. So, okay. The gentleman in brown batik, could you please provide? Thank you for your questions. Could you mention your name and your institution, please?
Yes.
Please.
Thank you, Pak Faris, for leading this session. My name is Fauzan. I'm from Astra Group. So basically, this is maybe a short question. As I taking notes from Pak Dawal explanation in the earlier of these discussions, there are two main concerns in hospital and health infrastructure in Indonesia. First is the human resource readiness, and the second one is willingness to pay from the customer side. Yeah, I would like to hear from ADB or Padawal point of view. Is there what is the attractiveness of health and hospital infrastructure in Indonesia, and what kind of support or contribution that given by that can be given by private to improve this infrastructure in the future. That's all, Pak Faris. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fauzan from Astra. I hope Pak Dawal is still listening. Waiting for Pak Dawal, maybe we can ask another one additional questions. Okay, if there are no additional question, maybe Pak Dawal. Pak Dawal, hello. Are you still
Yes,
there?
thanks, Pak
Okay.
Faris. Okay, so a very interesting question actually, and I must say that there is a lot which private sector can provide, can help. And if I understood the question correctly, it was about what is the attractiveness of getting private sector into PPPs, right? So from that perspective, there is a lot that private sector can provide. There have been various studies which have shown that the cost overruns and time overruns in construction for hospitals is decreased if private sector is involved through PPPs, and this also kind of feeds into the whole aspect of implementing a project through PPP. PPP does take more time for preparation, which is very necessary time. But then once the project has been prepared properly, then all the other steps throughout the life of the PPP contract it produces. So private sector not only can help in construction, they also can help in bringing in new designs to any hospital or healthcare facilities. Then they also help in operations, and again, both in clinical or non-clinical operations for healthcare PPPs. And the adoption, the speed of adoption of new technology has always been faster in private sector. And as you know, medical and health is a field where there is a lot of innovation on the technology side, and as I said, traditionally, private sector has been much more fast in adopting and implementing a technology in their hospitals. So these are just a few things, but there are, when we go into the nitty-gritties, there are many other factors also. Let me try to just add one last point, rather philosophical in a way. Right now in public hospitals, what is lacking is accountability.
The second token of appreciation is given to Mr. Ronald Tan. The third token of appreciation is handed to Bapak Syahrun Sikar. Up next, the token appreciation is handed to Bapak Iwan Sinambela. And since Mr. Dawal Jam cannot be with us here today, please take a symbolic handover of token of appreciation by way of photograph. Ladies and gentlemen, one more round of applause for all of the moderators and panelists that have participated in this event. After a series of productive and perceptive discussions, unfortunately, the event has formally come to an end. We hope that each of us has gained insightful takeaways from this event, and we believe that this will not be the last discussion for us regarding the development of PPP scheme in Indonesia. And ladies and gentlemen, if I can get your attention, I'd like to make some last announcements before we formally end this event. So if I could just get your attention for a little bit, I'd like to explain the next events. So after this event, we will have a networking lunch where you can enjoy the buffet and continue your engagements right now. But before that, should you have any further inquiries or would you like to discuss matters on PPP, please be informed that there will be a PPP Joint Office consultation desk in this event, in this venue, which will be available until the end of the networking lunch, which is until 1:30 p.m. Jakarta time. And beyond this event, the PPP Joint Office is able to accommodate your queries and information requests regarding PPPs and regional PPPs. You can contact the PPP Joint Office through the email address ppp@bappenas.go.id, and it can also be found in the Zoom chat room for online participants. And once again, we would like to give the highest appreciation to the online participants for joining this event, and we hope to see you in our future events and engagements. For our offline esteemed guests and participants, we have scheduled a networking lunch, so please enjoy the buffet, and we would like to let you know that you can take the food from the buffet outside and eat it here in the round table. And you don't have to be in your assigned seats. Okay, so enjoy the buffet and please be further acquainted with one another. Good afternoon. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom. Om Santi Santi Om. Namo Buddhaya.
Infrastruktur menjadi lokomotif pembangunan nasional dan daerah yang menggerakkan pertumbuhan ekonomi suatu negara. Oleh karenanya, penting bagi pemerintah untuk mewujudkan kehadiran infrastruktur dalam kehidupan masyarakat, terutama infrastruktur dasar seperti penyediaan air minum, sanitasi, kebutuhan pembiayaan infrastruktur. Dalam mengimplementasikan skema pembiayaan inovatif, pemerintah juga memperhatikan isu perubahan iklim, isu sosial, dan elemen kualitas lainnya dalam pembiayaan infrastruktur. Target Indonesia untuk mencapai Nationally Determined Contribution pada tahun 2030 dan komitmen pemerintah untuk memperhatikan kesinambungan fiskal, kepastian penyediaan layanan kepada masyarakat, dan keberlanjutan layanan menjadi fokus utama utama dalam formulasi berbagai kebijakan pembiayaan infrastruktur. Salah satunya dengan penerapan prinsip-prinsip quality infrastruktur investment dalam penyiapan proyek